Aloha Friday, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm excited about this episode because we are highlighting an organization in Central America doing great things. Peter Schaller with Rayo de Sol out of Nicaragua doing great things. Folks, thank you for joining us. All those that are viewing us live right now, I appreciate you. By all means, get in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Peter, my brother, thank you for being with me today on this episode of Aloha Friday Live.
Good morning, Enrique. Thanks so much for having me on and for creating this space. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. I love what you're doing out there for a young man that grew up in Puerto Rico as a young kid. I echo and kind of am similar to the environment that's there. You're dealing with a power outage. I understand that. That's one of the things that we deal with in Puerto Rico, especially nowadays. But I wanted to highlight the work that you're doing out there in Nicaragua because it is so vital. There's a lot of people providing this type of service throughout the world and different countries. I wanted to take you an opportunity to give you this space as a fellow outlier too. It's heartwarming to see what we do not only as a group but as individuals throughout the world. But before we get into all that, Peter, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I grew up in Connecticut, actually, in New Haven County. And I think I probably realized when I was maybe 16 or 17 years old that there was a much bigger world out there outside of suburban Connecticut, and that the world wasn't exactly the place that it should be for so many millions of people. So when I was a teenager, I started getting involved in nonprofit organizations, initially mostly working on environmental issues. And then I remember having a very profound conversation with a friend who said, well, you can't really expect people to be concerned about environmental issues if they don't have their basic needs met. And it was something, it sounds like a simple concept, but it had never really occurred to me before, just maybe because of my upbringing. And I made a radical change at that point. I was probably maybe 19 or 20 by then, and decided to work on issues of poverty. So before moving to Central America, I moved around the U.S. a bit and worked with homeless folks and worked with disabled adults in Arizona. And the first time I came to Nicaragua, I was just blown away. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you that there is definitely a problem with poverty and extreme poverty in the United States, but it's nothing like in developing countries. And that's why I guess I decided to stay here and, spend about half of my life here now, because the poverty here is so deep and so broad, and there really is no safety net of social services to save people when they get too sick, too poor, too desperate, and that's that we try and do, is to create that safety net.
And I love that. I, as you're talking, I'm thinking back home, right? And for those that know, Puerto Rico is beautiful. Nicaragua is beautiful. But there are issues, for a person, there are scales, right? There's dirt poor and there's rich, right? And so all those scales, you have a variety of people living in all those different stages of life. But when you're poor, right? And in America, we know there are folks homeless. There are folks without medical attention. There are folks that are dirt poor, and it's amazing that in a country like ours here in the States that would exist, but it does. And so I love your mission. I love that you found that so early. I mean, that's not normal, right? Most kids are inward looking. You were actually looking out, and by the age of 20, going into this endeavor. And folks, I want to just give you a point of reference of where Peter's at real quick, so you can kind of see where he's doing and where he's at. This is where he works in Matagalpa, Nicaragua. You see the point on the map just as a point of reference, but I love what you're doing, Peter. So take me through that young man's brain, because it's so intriguing that you would at such a young age to to say, this is a real issue, and I aim to do something about it.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure. I definitely had some influences within my family. I have an uncle that spent many years working in social services and also did a lot of work in Mexico and Central America, and spent a year living with him in Virginia, and that was really key to find out that you could actually spend your life doing good work and very necessary work, and also eke out a living at it. And if you go into the nonprofit sector, I mean, you can forget any dreams of accumulating wealth or having any kind of extreme level of comfort, but you can get by. And it was that example that I think that really encouraged me to pursue a career in social services and especially in international development. And it really is, it's necessary. And you and I were talking a little bit yesterday that the world, the developed world, the United States and Europe and some Asian countries have been pouring millions and millions of dollars into international development for about 75 years. And still today, we wake up in a world where basically a billion people are living in extreme poverty, and almost a billion people don't have access to fresh water. And it's disproportionate to the amount of wealth we have in the world. We have enough technology, enough knowledge, enough wisdom, and enough resources to solve all those problems today if we wanted to, if the will existed. But unfortunately, we haven't, obviously. And so in small countries like Nicaragua that are essentially forgotten. I mean, it was a hotspot in the 1980s with the Iran-Contra scandal, and the Cold War and the alliance with Cuba and Russia. But when the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union was disbanded, everybody sort of forgot about the satellite countries that formed part of that. And the U.S. has had a long intervention in not just Nicaragua, but in a lot of Latin American countries. It goes back not to the 1980s, but to the 1880s. And we don't want to get too much into politics, but U.S. foreign policy does have a huge influence on development of small countries, not only in this region, but particularly Latin America, which is right in the U.S.'s backyard. So what we do essentially is focus on ways that with the limited resources we have, we can work to reduce poverty, create opportunities for children and families, and really invest in long-term community development strategies.
Yeah, I love that, and I know you're working on uh, a trip, right? We're all looking forward to it as
Yes.
outliers, and being able to support in whatever means we have and ways that we can. You decided early that getting yourself in the mud, right, was the way of doing it. Not many people are willing to do that, and so I commend you on doing that so early. It wasn't just hey, you left the states, you did it in the states. You was able to affect some change in Arizona and in all the places that you got involved with, and now you chose, and I'm sure you was eye struck when you when you saw the beauty of the open range out there in Nicaragua. It's almost similar to what we see in Puerto Rico when you get into the bosque and the mountains, and you just like, oh my goodness, this does exist in this world. And so I know the beauty was a point of captivating you, but I'm sure the people, right, and the heart of the people was something that tugged at your heart as well.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of times when we have folks come down and visit, maybe for the first time, or um, that don't know much about Latin America, they often ask that question. Why have you stayed so long? And it's not for everybody. It is. It's not an easy lifestyle. Things have gotten better here over the years, or the 25 or 26 years I've lived here, no doubt. But you get used to sort of going without too. Like we were joking this morning. I mean, you wake up tomorrow and the power's out. It's been out for hours at our office. Nobody has any idea when it's coming back on. Could have been the storm. Could be, some kind of maintenance. But you just sort of adapt. So I rushed across town and came back home because fortunately we have electricity here. Same thing with water. In the United States and Europe and in a lot of other countries, you just assume that every time you wake up and turn the faucet, that fresh, safe water is going to come out, and that's not the case here. In food shortages, we often are subject to food shortages, and medicine is not always available. So those are the kinds of things you sort of get used to But as you were saying, and as you well know, from people that are from Latin America know more better than anybody that what really encourages somebody like me to stay here and spend my life here is the family and the community and the generosity. I have never seen any more generous people in the world than some of the people that are living in the most abject poverty. It's amazing. You could go to somebody's house. If I took this laptop and walked out into the mountains and went to the furthest, most remote community in the mountains, they would pull out their best chair and they would serve you a cup of coffee and they would give you their last tortilla if that's all they had. It's just sort of inherent in Latin American country, and I think that's I thought that was sort of missing. It's not completely gone in the U.S., but it's definitely in danger, and certainly in the Northeast, where I grew up. That sense of community and family has been declining, I think, for several generations. So here, it's very much alive and vibrant, and you really feel a part of the culture and the family. And Nicaraguans are very accepting, especially of foreigners. They just sort of invite you in, and you're part of it.
Well, in the Navy, I had the opportunity to do some work in Central and South America.
Mm-hmm.
Not foreign to me because we're kind of that way. I think I'm not going to label it the Latin thing, but I think those that know what poverty looks like understand that the real power is in the give, right? And we understand that when we share, we're all rich, even if it's the last thing, right? Bringing that chair. I vividly remember, elders, and when you would go visit family, even in the remotest parts of the mountains, where the roosters were what what brought you out in the morning.
Yeah.
It would be like that, and if it was the last thing, it was the last thing for everybody. And so I love that you have experienced that and can see. And I tell you, there are some areas, and you talk about community in the states, that I wish community was more of an issue in terms of people actually enacting it and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it for themselves. Now, you got there, you want to change an aspect of folks. You fell in love with the place, you fell in love with the people, and then you get your hands dirty. So how did that evolve for you? Because I know that nonprofits, like you mentioned earlier, you're not making hand over fist in terms of finances, but
Yeah.
there are some times where the support is good enough that you can live comfortably in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, exactly. So I've had, prior to working with Rayo de Sol, I had two other jobs at large organizations. One was a startup when I first came down here in 95 or 96. And then I worked for another organization in the middle there. And then with some friends from Atlanta, they had actually started Rayo de Sol. It registered in Georgia as a 501c, as a nonprofit, 501c3, excuse me. And didn't know exactly where to go with it. So we got in touch probably around 2007 or 8, and started looking at different options for establishing a presence in Nicaragua. The folks on the board, the founders, were people of faith and people generous and wanted to do good works, but didn't really have any nonprofit or development experience. So we met up early on and started to sort of lay the groundwork for what is today a considerable organization. I mean, we're not a huge organization, but if you look at our track record over the past 10 years, I mean, our budget has grown probably tenfold. And, we started out a small project that benefited 400 students. And, now we have programs that provide services to more than 10,000 people up here in the north central mountains of Nicaragua, which is, one of the most impoverished regions of the country. And, that was a lot of work. It took a lot of patience because, to build something up from the ground takes time. And there's a lot of trial and error. And I think we've learned a lot more from our mistakes than from our successes. But, I think we now have a very well-respected and, credible organization that's providing services and working with a lot of partner organizations, a lot of public agencies in the Nicaraguan government, a lot of other nonprofits. And our base of supporters in the U.S. has grown quite a bit over the past several years too.
And that's wonderful. I don't know how many people watching right now have ever ventured into nonprofit. It's not an easy thing, especially from one nation to another. And then in situation, right? You're in there. You're not doing it from Atlanta. You're doing it from in-house. And I was looking at the website, folks, for you that are looking there in the chat or in the comments. I have linked all of the social media for Rayo de Sol, also their website. So take a look at that at your leisure and get familiar with what they're doing. But Peter, I saw the other day you posted, hey, this grand celebration of opening of a library, right? The new commissioning of a library, and I looked at that picture, and I told you prior to this, right? When I think library, and I'm going down the street here, not too far from my house, and you're looking at the new library, and wow, there's bricks, there's glass. I mean, there's aisles of books. There's a person in the front. The library to me has a picture. And then I looked at your picture of the library, and this for those listening now live and in the replay. If you take a picture, take a look at that picture, and you will sober up very fast at the joy, the smiles, the laughter, the celebration of this opening of a library that in the United States is probably your shed in your backyard. And I almost tear up because I can remember going back in my recesses of my mind of my first bathroom was a latrine. My first bathroom was outside an outhouse, and I'm only 51 years old, right? So, in Puerto Rico, these things exist. In Central America, these things exist. And I'm looking at this picture, and I'm reminiscing myself of what it was to grow up at that caliber of life, and what I have today. And I was just overwhelmed with the feeling of gratitude and appreciation for what we have, yet many can't get there because they've lived in these brick libraries, right? That's all they know. And bless you guys for what you're doing. But tell us about that project, because I know it brought a lot of joy to the kids there.
Yeah, that's a special project. So we have five main program areas that we develop, and one of them, and sort of our probably our signature program, is called Educational Quality, where we work in partnership with the Ministry of Education, and we have a direct incidence and influence in the public school system. We decided early on that we didn't want to build separate a private school or have our own infrastructure. We wanted to have greater impact. So we have been working through the public school system, and currently we work in 37 public schools here in the northern part of the country. And one of the key elements of our educational quality program is reading, because there's no way to emphasize how important reading comprehension is for every human being, no matter if you're a farmer or a lawyer or a doctor or a small business owner. I mean, reading comprehension is one of the most critical human skills that we can develop. And I remember, I grew up in a home where there were always books, and I remember my dad reading stories to me before I went to bed, and I've been an avid reader my whole life. But people here have very, very limited access to reading materials, and they're very expensive. So there's no publishing industry here, obviously. So everything that's published is imported, which means it's considerably more expensive. So a simple children's storybook, might cost as much as a few days of food for a family. Just a quick comparison. So we try and develop school libraries at as many locations as we can. And this particular project was really special because we had a group of students from Atlanta from Heritage Preparatory School that raised funds for the project, and they came down the first week of May and worked in the community side by side. So it was beyond the library. It was also an opportunity for sort of a cultural exchange and for students from both countries to sort of get to know one another. And like you said, it's a very small structure. It's about 12 feet by 12 feet. We've got a couple of wooden tables in there that our kids have built. We have a small carpentry shop as one of our micro enterprises at our office, and a small porch where the kids can have a study area, reading area outside. And we started off. We got about 100 books in there yesterday from things we had in our storeroom, and we will be purchasing more books over the next couple of months. That small library, which is for a small rural school, will actually service 6 communities, because there's essentially no real library system. You could hear, if you were here in the city of Matagalpa, there is a sort of a public library, but it's nothing that you would assimilate with a public library in the United States. There's all the reference material is extremely outdated. There's very little. You can't borrow books, and it's really difficult for kids and adults to get reading material. So we work with students and primary age students to develop reading clubs where we're trying to really inspire kids to enjoy reading as a recreational activity. They don't feel like it's something that's imposed. And a couple of years ago, we also realized that since most adults don't read very often, that we started developing reading clubs for teachers too, because how can a teacher be passionate about teaching reading if they don't like to read? So we also have reading clubs that reach about 250 teachers right now. And we share reading material every month with that group. And they love it. Once somebody is introduced to reading, it can really understand the beauty and, the real joy in reading, then it really changes your life. And, the learning process becomes really continuous, when you have a love of reading. So that small library and a small community called the Mixto will actually benefit about 500 students. And, we'll continue to get as much material as we can in there. That'll be for primary students and also for high school students and adults from the community.
Folks, a 12 by 12 space, 500 people. We take so much for granted. I mean, and the more I listen, the more I dig in. And Isabel joining us from the UK, love it to death. And some others that are joining us. Thank you for joining us today as we're highlighting. And just take a pause here. Take Peter, and he's the executive director at Rayo de Sol in Nicaragua. For those of you that are just joining us now, and to give you a point of reference, this is where it is that they are located in Matagalpa, Nicaragua, and doing some great work down there. We're just briefly talking about the project of the library, 12 by 12 space, multiple communities. And this is not your typical library in the States, folks. I promise you that. If you go on their website or their social media channels, you'll see what that space looked like. But I was just overjoyed to see the smiles, to see the impact. And you bring up an interesting point. And as I dive into leadership, the teachers, right? You have to have something for the teachers to continue their passion. And for those of you listening or viewing us today, in leadership, you have to do that. You just because you got somewhere doesn't mean that you'll stay there or continue to have the same passion after a while. And so I love that you're addressing that need. Leaders that are listening, are you addressing that need for yourself? Because I'm telling you, passion sometimes weighs down because it's just burnt out. And so make sure that as a leader that you're providing that for yourself in one way or another. Now, Peter, we briefly were talking before the show about culture, about climate, about people, norms, traditions. That really does have an impact in how your mission goes. And so how were you able to adjust that from an American born and raised child to going down into Central America and trying to affect the community? Because you know those of us in Central and the Caribbean, we understand what conquistadors are, right? And and people come in with the best of intentions, but it could go wrong real quick. So how were you able to adjust with that and learning those norms and how to truly impact that community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So development is tricky, and especially like you say when it's cross cultural. For me personally, it was just sort of a process of really giving myself over completely to full integration culturally. I've never lived in a remote area where we were foreigners or sort of locked away behind gated communities. I've always lived in very normal everyday neighborhoods. I have kids here. My kids are half Nicaraguan, but they're probably actually 80% Nicaraguan, and they've grown up with the same thing, with sort of one foot. And well, we do know there's a little bit more comfortable life out there, but also we're also surrounded by this reality of that there is poverty and there is a lack of social services and resources. And as an organization, I think it's important for me to point out that I am the only non-Nicaraguan staff member in Nicaragua. We have one staff person in the U.S., but all of our other staff, are local professionals, and they take on a lot of leadership. As an organizational leader in a nonprofit, as leaders of any organization, you've always got to be finding ways to motivate and inspire, your staff to accomplish and to achieve greatness and satisfaction in their work. But in the nonprofit sector, it can be a little bit more complicated because we deal with a lot of very difficult situations, and we deal with people living in extreme poverty. We also provide social services for cases of domestic abuse and rape. We had a young 15-year-old young woman in our office this week that had a story that would break your heart in 1,000 pieces if you listen to it. And that can be really draining, because it's, aside from the fact that we don't have a fancy office with air conditioning and new computers and new desks and things like that, I mean, we're also taking on sort of the crises and the difficult situations that living in poverty bring to people's lives, and we take that on our shoulders and we sort of internalize that every day, and then you have to go home and figure out what to do with it. So for us, it's really important. We work closely with our staff. We do a lot of offsite training and discussion groups and devotionals and things like that, and really try and make sure that we're taking care of our staff and building up in them those leadership qualities and the ability to process the difficult situations we deal with every day, because otherwise it can break you, and you can get burned out, like you said, really quickly when you're dealing with really intense situations. So it is a continual process, and there's not a day that goes by that we're not thinking about staff development and leadership development on some level.
And I love that you bring the integration, the full integration. A lot of leaders, they go from one organization to another and expect the workplace to change to their tune. When and if if people, they'll be quick to let you know who the boss is, right?
Yeah.
But it's something to consider, folks, when you're leading, even in the states. Your task is the full integration as a leader, to understand what your people require, what it is that you are there to help your people achieve, not how you're going to make them achieve your goals, right? And a typical uh, climate challenge when you're talking about leaders, switching leaders, people taking new leadership roles. Consider your people first and their needs, and they'll help you meet yours. That's for sure. So, good job in that regard to fully integrating into that community. I know they really appreciate having someone that's not from there to come and accept them fully, right? And then also think about that. Hey, I got to start thinking about how I'm going to affect this community, but it can't be outside in. I have to go inside out, and it's wonderful to see. Now, you have events. We're thinking of the Outlier Project. Thanks, Scott McGregor, for highlighting that for us, and we're looking forward to something like that in the future. What do you have going on now? You did the library. What other areas? Because you say, hey, we have other areas that we kind of have in the on the burner. So what other areas do you have going? And
Yeah,
then, how can people start possibly supporting that?
absolutely. So I'll preface that at the risk of getting too long-winded, but so I've been working in nonprofits a long time, and I'm probably one of the, the greatest critics of nonprofits, because I've seen, a lot of money poorly spent. So we are a non-denominational, faith-based organization. Um, what I've seen over the years, there tend to be, sort of two big buckets of development organizations. There are the highly technical, maybe international agencies like, the World Bank and USAID and other large agencies, some private too, that have, very technically proficient projects and programs, but they tend to forget about the human side. And then you have the faith-based, a lot of religious organizations on the other side that tend to be a lot softer, a lot of sort of charitable giveaway kind of stuff, play with the kids and, give out candy. And people do that with the best of intentions, but it's not development, and it's not making a lasting impact. So our challenge has been, as an organization, to remain, true to our values and really focus on the human aspects of the people we're dealing with. I mean, we're not dealing with numbers. We're not dealing with a percentage of people living in poverty. We're dealing with children and families and communities, and human beings that get up every day and feel and hurt and and laugh and cry. And that's the first part, is to always have our eye on on that. But we also try and be as technically proficient in our programs as a large international development agency. So that's been sort of a balancing point. With that in mind, so we've got the education program. We're working in the public school system to improve educational quality. We have a community health program where we provide medical attention and public health services to the same 37 communities, many of whom have very limited access to health services. So our doctor sees 300 or 400 patients a month. We've got a youth program. We have 750 students that are on scholarships to stay in high school, and now some have gone on to graduate and are in university and technical schools. And we've got a community development program that's focused more on economic development. So we have vocational training, microcredit loaning for developing small family businesses. And the rural communities, we also work on sustainable agriculture and agroforestry strategies. There's a tremendous amount of environmental damage in Nicaragua. It's still an agricultural economy, but there's been a lot of environmental damage to continue expanding, the agricultural borders and also livestock. So we try and, come up with solutions that are to be better stewards of our natural resources while helping people to generate income. And our last program is called Spiritual Growth, and that's where we, religion and politics try and keep them, to not be controversial, but we have a very, open and inclusive policy. We try and provide spaces where people can explore their faith, and we welcome everybody, kids, young people, and adults to the gatherings, the reflection groups that we hold, so that people can explore their faith in a very safe and inviting environment, and completely non-discriminatory. And because also faith, our personal development of a spiritual life is really important to our overall well-being as well. So those are the 5 programs that we implement, and they all sort of connect together. Each one of them has quite a bit of overlap with all the others. And our dream is to work ourselves out of a job. Hopefully that these programs can make a lasting and profound enough impact on the communities to hopefully one day our services will no longer be necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the true mission is to help them develop to the point where they're self-sustaining, right? Something that you can walk away from and they can just take on, and hopefully for generations impact, right? And I love the work that you're doing out there. I love the touch points for a holistic development. I'm often talking about the holistic leader, all areas that we need to address personally in order for us to develop ourselves. And you're taking this to a region now where you're trying to do it in mass, and that's such a challenging thing to do. So I'll definitely be praying for you and your family and the mission and everything that you guys are doing down there. So, um, what does the future look like?
Future's looking really good. I mean, we have our organization really is blessed. I mean, it started with some really incredible people in Atlanta, and we've just grown to include more and more incredible people. And we have weathered quite a few storms. And when other organizations have been shutting their doors and laying off staff and cutting programs, we have continued to grow. So, without touching on the political situation too much, there was a political conflict here in 2018. The country basically came to a standstill, very close to civil war, for a lot of different reasons. And because of that, a lot of organizations pulled out or shut down programs in Nicaragua, and we actually continued to grow through that. And then as soon as recovery started from the political instability, COVID hit, and we also saw a lot of organizations shutting down and closing their doors and keeping their staff safe. And we sat down with our staff and said, if anybody is uncomfortable or feels like they have a risk, I mean, feel free to go home and work from home, no questions asked. But if you want to be here, I mean, we're going deeper. So that's actually when we started to really develop our community health program. And we worked on the front lines in every neighborhood and every community, even going door to door during COVID, and grew our public health program. We actually grew. We gained some new supporters, and our financing grew during that period as well. And now we continue to grow. We got some funding from a very generous donor last year to build an office. We've been renting a very small house in a neighborhood that we actually work in, that we outgrew about 3 years ago. We literally have staff one on top of another and boxes stacked everywhere. And so we're building a new office that will have an actual clinic room for our doctor, and it'll have 2 vocational led classrooms and an outdoor meeting space for larger gatherings. So that's been a true blessing as well. We should be into that building hopefully by December, and that'll allow us to really just improve the services we're providing. But we're actually, yesterday at the library inauguration, we had the local representative from the Ministry of Education there, and we were talking about expansion. He said, when can you go to such and such a community? And he rattled off probably 10 different names. And I said, well, as soon as we can get the funding, I mean, we can go there. So, our goal is to continue to grow. We've got a program model that's very replicable. We've designed it that way intentionally. We could, make some minor adjustments and, set up another office or 2 or 3 other offices in different parts of the country where, the challenges and poverty is just the same, and continue to grow. So, like it or not, a large part of my job is fundraising. We're continually looking for new resources and donors and grants and any opportunity to continue to grow, because, personally and organizationally, we really believe in what we do. And we believe that we're doing things right. Our organization is extremely efficient. Our overhead rate is very low. And people that look at our 990, IRS tax return and look at our financials would be incredibly surprised. If I told you how much that library costs, it costs us about $4,000. It's hard to even believe how much we can get done with so little money. So, hopefully we will continue to enjoy those blessings and continue to attract new supporters and new resources and be able to benefit more communities.
Absolutely. Now, folks, if there's anything that you have ever wondered about budgeting and building a facility that is impacting so many people all at once for such a small price, and a lot of times we have organizations, especially here in the U.S., that need the same similar help. Obviously, the cost pattern is a whole lot different when you're talking about building something here, but why not build a 12 by 12 somewhere in some community, right? And have it serve as a center of knowledge for children and even adults. So congratulations on that. Now, Peter, if someone that has been listening or may be listening here in the future as a replay wanted to contact you for anything, for either for support, for in materials, for support financially, for support actually going down there and you know, lending their hands to your mission, how would they do that?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy because yeah, as a small nonprofit, like I said, we only have one staff person in the United States, and myself. So all of the social media accounts are actually run by the two of us, you know, and so all the messages get to me directly. So if anybody contacts us through our Facebook page or Instagram or LinkedIn or through our website, you know, that I get those emails directly. We don't have any marketing staff. We don't have any communication staff. We do all that in house. That's what, you know, one of the many ways that we save resources and try and keep, you know, our supporters informed, but in a very low cost manner. So we are, you know, always looking for folks that want to come down for a visit. I think it's really significantly more impactful when somebody actually comes down and meets families and goes into a home and listens to, you know, these are the challenges I'm facing every day, much more so than if we showed a video or, you know, a presentation. In fact, we've had a couple of visitors this year that have gone home so inspired they've contacted their churches or family members, you know, and are doing outreach to try and raise more support. So we're always open to visitors. If anybody would like to donate to a specific program, we can designate funds to education or health or economic development or a scholarship. So all that communication will come to me directly and to my colleague Leslie Long in the United States. And we have a very quick turnaround on communication. So if you write to us today, you'll probably get a response within an hour.
Outstanding. Now, folks, you know, even from the States, you can help, right? You talking about, hey, I don't have a dedicated market. I don't have a dedicated this, you know, and I'm gonna chat with Peter here, post the show, and we'll detail the things that he could use help in, and maybe you know, out of the kindness of your heart and based on your expertise can help. You know, having somebody run, I know, a marketing, right? It's a thing, um, and that would free you up for anything. But folks, if you want to support Peter, his mission down there with Rayo de Sol in Nicaragua, please get in the comments and let us know. Let us know. I'll get you in touch with Peter. You guys can go from there, but I'm sure that there's ways that he could use your help. Hopefully, Peter, we'll see each other not in too of a distant time and future.
Yes, sir.
As a visitor, I would love to lend my hand, right, in your mission. Uh, and as I had remarked before, you know, I would be there for you and what you would have to do. It's important as folks that do help that it's not our mission, right? You're lending the hand. But Peter, thank you so much for your work, for what you are doing to impact lives. You are changing the trajectory of somebody's life forever, right? And you may not realize it. You may realize it, but I'm telling you, as a person that was raised in similar background and similar environments, it's important to understand how much you are impacting those lives, and I thank you. Folks, if you would like to support this mission, all of the details to their social media is in the comments. Please feel free to reach out to Peter on LinkedIn or any of those social media platforms. And if you can lend a hand or you can support in any way, let him know. And let's get him a little further down the road as he actually has his hands in the mud there, locally changing those lives. Peter, any last words?
The last thing I want to share is I have a close friend who always carried a slip of paper in his wallet, and it's a phrase that probably a lot of you have heard before. And I looked up to see where it actually originated, and I guess a lot of people have said it, but the one I like best was John Lewis, who said, if not me, who? And if not now, when? I think he said that when he was about to walk over the bridge in Selma, Alabama, on the famous Civil Rights March. And the same thing applies to all of us today. There are a lot of problems in the world, and I think we always expect that somebody else is going to fix them. But if it's not me, then who's going to do it? And if I don't start now, then when will I start? So thank you very much, Enrique. We really appreciate the space and the time and your compassion. And it's been a great conversation.
Very powerful statement indeed. And folks, that is a question we all could ask ourselves at any given time, but especially here now. We come to the end of Aloha Friday Live. Folks, I want to remind you of a couple of things. We are on the hunt for 500 subscribers on YouTube. You see the channel right there on the top of the screen. If you go to @DTLW Podcast on YouTube, you'll find our channel. Please support us that way and support all the guests that we have coming in, either through the live show or the podcast itself. But today it has been all about Peter, Rayo de Sol, Nicaragua, and the mission they are having out there. And I hope that you and every other person that may be listening will consider supporting their mission. Peter, God bless you. God bless all the folks and your staff out there in Nicaragua. Aloha Friday, everybody. Have a safe weekend, and we will see you next week when we have another great guest doing great things in our world.